ladies and gents, to another mini recap of the Game 2 between Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat. And I am joined by Nick Bam Boylan once again. Nick, how are we doing?
Pretty good, Jack. Just breathing after that roller coaster Game 2, but what a game it was.
What a game it was indeed, mate. What are your takeaways?
Well, obviously, Boston started like a house on fire, shooting around 60% from the field. They're looking like everything was going their way. And then on the other end, someone who we talked about struggling in that first game was Duncan Robinson, who just had to sort of squint and blink for a little bit. It was like, was Klay Thompson out there in South Beach? And yeah.
Joe Harris, mate. Joe Harris. Come on, please.
Okay. I'm sorry. I got to forget who I'm talking to. But punctuated by that ridiculous three that he took, the ball barely sort of got below his shoulders. He finished with 18 points, but was really cooking early. And Boston looked like they had the game pretty much under their control really for the first half. Kemba was cooking early up. That was one thing that a lot of people were sort of looking forward to seeing if he could respond to some of the criticism that he'd got both in the previous series, but also to start this Eastern Conference Finals. He was great early, had 14 points, looked really lively and energetic and engaged. And it was really great to see that back from Kemba, whether he was, dancing in the mid-range and hitting step-back jumpers, a couple of threes early as well. He looked like Kemba Walker. But then the third quarter was just insane. The turnaround from Miami. We saw them go to that zone defense that has been such a success for them already. And someone who was really struggling in that first half of them, Bam Adebayo, really came to life as Miami really eviscerated the Celtics with the pick and roll. Every time it felt like Adebayo was getting dunk after dunk after dunk and really fired them up. And it was an immense turnaround with a 37-point quarter for the Heat. And then it really turned the tide of the game.
It really did. That third quarter, the Celtics have really struggled throughout the playoffs in those third quarters. And you mentioned the zone. It's the danger zone for the Boston Celtics when it certainly comes into fruition. I thought Goran Dragic continues to be great. Hashtag Dragic better than Kemba. I'm going to look, if I'm recapping Celtics games, you're going to expect a lot of saltiness from me. And I'm going to touch on the stuff that went behind the scenes, Nick. And we heard in the locker room via Malika Andrews and some other reporters that Marcus Smart was heard visibly yelling. There was clanking. Apparently, Paul George was shooting in the locker room as well. But there was clanking aplenty. I mean, what is going on in the Boston Celtics locker room? Is this a problem?
Well, we thought the problem was a certain point guard who's now in Brooklyn, but potentially not. I do find it slightly humorous if there was clanking going on with Marcus Smart, because that's the sound that his jump shot was making in that last quarter. The amount of bad shots that he took, particularly in that fourth quarter, we talked about in the first game, and Nick and Corey talked about it on the outlet, that Marcus, as much as you take Marcus Smart like good shooting nights, you don't want him having that amount of shots per game. And we did talk about Jaylen Brown getting involved more. And up until the fourth quarter, he was such a player who was sitting back and he wasn't getting involved until really that fourth quarter. He was the difference why Boston were able to even get back in that game at all. Massive offensive rebound and put back layup there. He did miss the game-tying three-point shot, but I thought his aggressiveness and assertiveness was what Boston was lacking in that fourth quarter. But yeah, the post-game fracas and I guess locker room troubles, it does spell a little bit of danger for the Celtics, because I think a lot of people on Twitter drew some parallels between this game and also the game between the Nuggets and the Clippers. And it was a team who wanted it more and looked a little bit more cohesive out there. And eventually the team who wanted it more got the win in the end through some fantastic desperation plays from Jimmy Butler on defense, who didn't have his best scoring night, but he showed that he doesn't need to have a big scoring night to have an impact on the game and get his team to a victory.
Absolutely. Hook it to my veins. I'm all for the drama. I'm all for the memes. You give it to me. Montrezl Harrell, Paul George are fighting. It's now Marcus Smart and everyone else in the locker room. They're trying to sweep it under. They're trying to downplay it. Celtics are falling apart. Love it. Hook it to my veins, Nick. Thanks for joining me as always, my friend. We'll be back for Game 3, and we'll also be back for Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. The Thick Lord himself taking on the King James, and the Los Angeles Lakers. Stay tuned.